call to order this meeting of the Hudson Board of Education for July 9th, 2013. As our first order of business, and in the absence of our clerk, Mr. Bell, I will be appointing Mr. Dan Chernahoy to be our clerk for this meeting. Please stand as you are able and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As our first order of business, we have some new faces at the table today that I would like to welcome. One not so new in a new role, though. So Mr. Grambo is here at the table as our new Systems Improvement Director. Andrea Volker, welcome to you as our new Human Resources Director. And Tony Mayer as our new Student Services Director. Welcome to all of you. Nice to have you. Also at the elementary level, we'd also like to welcome our two new principals that are on board as of July 1st. We have Katie Koppenbarger at Rivercrest Elementary here, and Kimberly Osterhughes at Willow River. And then as a transition at the high school, Peg Shoemaker is in full force and effect there at our high school, serving as our principal. Next on the agenda is our report section, and I'll turn it over to Tim for a state biennial budget update, please.
Okay, well, I'll be pretty brief. There are a lot of updates in the state budget, but really the things that are affecting Hudson. That's probably what I'll boil it down to. One of the things is that we've certainly did get our estimate. The July 1st estimate came out from the state, and so it's based on the changes in the biennial budget that was passed and signed by the governor, which is effective July 2nd. One of the changes that I would probably say that affects us significantly, and it really affects all districts significantly, is the $75 per student categorical aid. And that's really a change in the way schools are funded. And so this is a categorical aid which is outside what they call the revenue limits for school districts. But for Hudson, that doesn't apply because the district under levies under those limits by quite a bit. But as compared to the past, there was a categorical aid last year. So to contrast that, we were not eligible for that aid piece because we didn't levy enough. This year, it's different. The law was written differently. The funding was written into law differently, so that every district qualifies, including Hudson. So that's been a positive, very positive thing for us. Again, as we go through that July 1st estimate, which is really one of the numbers that we look towards as we're working through the budget and formulating the budget, is that, and it's just an estimate until we get to October and the final numbers come out. So unless you've got any questions, I'm going to keep it very short, as I said.
Board members, any questions for Tim? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's the 2013-14 preliminary budget. Tim?
Okay, I'll walk you through this, and we'll just start at the top and move down. What we've got is, at this point, when we plug in those state aid estimates, we've got some really good news, and the good news is that when we look at the increase in the total levy, it's 1.62%. So 1.62 compared to the CPI for 2012 of 2.07. So the levy is going up under what the CPI was for 2012. Some of the other pieces, again, you can see what the equalization aid is, approximately $3,040,000, and that's based on that July 1st estimate. And we always say we don't get too excited one way or the other on that estimate because we know going into October that there are statewide numbers that have to be submitted by all districts for DPI to finalize those numbers. We know that property values influence that number, and those are not finalized until October as well for school districts. So those are things that we'll be watching for as we go through. But that number can go up or down depending on all of those different factors. This includes a previously board-approved new staffing units, so these costs for new staff that you approved previously are in there. It also includes a health insurance increase. As we said before, we save significant dollars by moving towards self-funded health insurance. We did have an increase that was built into the budget, however, and we've got increases in student membership aid units, which is it's a little different than a head count, but that's going up 1.24%. We've got the estimated decrease in federal aid from sequestration. And that's an estimate at this point, but we're figuring it has an impact of about $118,000. So we're going down in revenue, federal revenue, by about $118,000. This budget also includes the underlevy, and that underlevy is $13.3 million. So again, the board would have the ability to levy $13.3 million more. I'm sure you're not going to do that. But you'd have that ability, and that's what kind of sets Hudson apart from the rest of the state. We underlevy more than most other districts, and usually we're number one in the state in the amount of underlevy. It includes the safety and security improvements, and that is $360,000 in this budget, and then pre-referendum contract, and then also estimates. And again, I'll strongly say estimates for UU studies, because until we continue to move forward and get more information to develop the scope of those studies, we're not exactly sure what the amount is that we're going to be putting in there. But we do have a placeholder in there for that. And then we've got the ITS infrastructure upgrades at $215,000. So those are the pieces that are in this budget. As I mentioned, the budget's really a work in progress all the way through October when you do a final approval of that budget. As more information becomes available, we continue to tweak the budget, and so we'll see these numbers will change as we move through the process here. Getting into the body of the report, we did add a new column so that you can compare what you looked at in June to where we are now. And so again, you can see that our property taxes in this version of the budget are going down from 26.1 to 25.5. And again, a lot of that's due to that state aid and that budget estimate. We also did lower some costs in this second version, the second run through. And then you can see the equalization aid, which is line 621. So it's going up 12.91%. Again, that's the estimate. We'll have to adjust when we know that final number. And then federal sources of aid in the general fund. That's going down, of course, because we've got the sequestration, and that's that estimate, and that's part of that $118,000 impact. And so our revenues are at $53.4 million versus previous $53.6 million. And as we go through, you'll see why those numbers have changed. And again, we'll get under the salary and benefits. Those are the new employees, the new positions that you had previously approved. It also includes extracurricular and the athletic pay adjustments from, of course, those had not been adjusted for many, many years. And then it includes the health insurance increase. And so we get to the 5.49. And then if we go down under line 300, which is other purchase services, at this point, if you look back up to the summary of major budget assumptions, the pre-referendum contract and estimates for the UU studies plus the ITS infrastructure upgrades are all included under that 300, line 300, other purchase service. So that's the reason for it going up 10%. Continuing down on that budget, under line 500, which is capital objects, that's going to include the safety and security the safety and security improvements of 360. So again, a reason for that increase. And then under the interfund transfers of special education, you'll see that going up. And again, that's the fund that's really the most impacted by this loss of $118,000 from federal sequestration. So there you've got a total down there of $53,416,000 versus $53,617,000. So that's about a $200,000 decrease, a little over $200,000 decrease from June to the July budget. And again, it gets the percentage increase in total expenses at 6.57. Going down, you can see that nothing's changed from the projected unassigned fund balance, and then you can see the breakdown of the debt service and the general fund levy. And again, that levy's going up in this version 1.62%. So, any questions on the first page?
Board members, any questions or comments for Tim?
I have a question.
Sandy?
In the salary and benefit figure of $38,067,860, can you tell me how much of that figure is not spoken for yet, that has being set aside for raises for the next year?
Well, and that's a tougher question to answer because this is we're in an annual bargaining environment, and so rather than answer that question, because we do have to bargain with the union, that isn't something we normally answer right away.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
You said out of that figure there was a certain amount of money out of that figure is being applied to the new positions that we hired, right?
Yes.
And then a certain amount of money has been spoken for already due to the raises that we gave the coaches and those people?
Right.
Okay. Are those the only two things that are in this figure besides expected pay raises going forward?
Yes, that would be the third piece would be an estimate of wage
so you
and
must have
salary
a figure.
adjustments.
You must have a figure for what it costs for the employees that we hired, the new hires that we approved.
Right.
And what is that figure?
That would be about $465,000.
Okay. And then what was the figure for the increased raises that we gave to coaches and all of those people that we voted for?
That would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of $65,000.
Okay, those are the figures I'm looking for. Thank you. So if I add those two figures together and subtract it from the 38 million, then that will give me the figure that I can, in my mind, think is set aside, money that's not spoken for at this point. Correct?
Well, you've got benefits in there as well. So there's increases for the health insurance, et cetera. So there's salary, wages, and benefits in that number.
Okay, do you know what a figure is for the benefits? You're talking about existing benefits, right?
Right, yes. But we had to, okay, so we had, going back, we had the health insurance, so that we went to self-funding, which saved dollars, but we still had a 7% increase for the health insurance.
And that 7% increase is in this 38 million?
Yes.
So 7% of what?
I'm going to say probably around $6.5 million total.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Any other board member questions for Tim?
Madam Chair, Tim, just a couple questions. I brought my sheet from our Finance Committee meeting. I just want to understand, because we just met a few weeks ago, and I understand the budget being finalized at the state level. But for example, on the revenue side, we had in there as of June 24, 320,000, and that changed to 316. And I have that as being like fees for athletics, student fees, and would we have decided that we had too much in there for, I guess I'm just trying to understand some of these adjustments.
Okay, can you say that again, Dan? I guess I need a little more clarification.
As of our Finance Committee preliminary budget sheet, for example, item 200, we did have in there 320,000, and under this new version, we have 316,000. I mean, not a big difference, but I see there's a number of tweaks within, you know, what we discussed a couple weeks ago. And some of these strike me as unusual because I wouldn't have expected to see changes in some of these, you know, dropping down to 300 purchase services, you know, some of those things, unless we got more information that helped us refine those
Right.
numbers.
Yeah, yeah, and the budget, as I've always said, is a work in progress.
Right.
And we change, so
Yep.
yes, absolutely, there have been changes since the time you reviewed it in the Finance Committee to now.
Okay.
And so, one of the drops was looking at the ITS upgrades. As more information became available, we were able to drop that figure down. We've adjusted safety and security improvements. And we've also adjusted under salary and benefits additionally. So when you look at the June to July budget change, again,
Right.
from the board meeting level, it's about $200,000 less. And majority of that would be the health insurance and then the ITS changes.
I have one other question.
Sandy?
You said that the benefits increase is about 7%, is 7%?
7% for the health insurance rate.
Okay, of $6 million. So that's, and then I can assume that about $420,000 of this budgeted amount is for increased health insurance premiums?
You know, Sandy, I'd have to go back and look at some of that detail. I don't have all that off the top of my head.
Does that seem like a lot? I guess I'm trying to figure out in my head why it would be so much. Is that standard for our health insurance costs to go up that much, or does that have to do with the fact that we're going to be self-funded now?
Well, self-funding should reduce over time, should reduce our expenditure on health insurance. But 6.5, it would roughly, I got to think about this a little bit because there's a lot of numbers, understand.
Well, maybe you can just get it for me. You know, I don't want to take up a
Yeah,
lot of time
I can
here.
do that.
Just-
Yeah,
If you
we
can just
can-
get me that figure, I just need to understand. You said 7% increase for health insurance. That's $420,000 if you take it by 6 million, and that's a lot of money. It seems like it's a lot of money.
It probably is a little less than that. But
Okay.
of course, there are other benefits, and when we talk about benefits, we're talking about Social Security, WRS. There are a number of different benefits in there that add up to
Can
that.
you just get me a breakdown of what the $38,067,000 is? What is in that figure?
Sure.
Great, thank you. You can just email it to me. Thank you.
Any other board member questions? Jamie?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Tim, I have a question. We're comparing, budget to budget. We don't have a column here for actual, and I know that we just ended the 2013 year, 9 days ago, and it'll be a while before you get the final numbers. As a board, we don't approve the budget for the 13-14 school year until the annual meeting. Is that right?
The annual meeting is a review of the budget. We don't even have, at that point, we don't have the final aid estimate. So from annual meeting in September to the October final approval of the budget, again, those numbers will change.
Okay.
So
We approve the levy then? Is that what we do at September?
you approve a proposed levy. Yeah.
Proposed levy,
Yeah.
all right.
But the final levy comes in October. You'll approve the final levy with the final budget in October.
Since I'm relatively new on the school board, what's our track record on these budgets as far as actuals? Whether we have to go back to 11-12, I guess would be the last year we have actual.
If we looked at actual budget, normally we come in under budget. Some years more, some years less. Sometimes it's pretty close, but we've got a pretty good track record of becoming. Our variance to budget is we've got a very good track record in variance to budget.
And some of that depends on then the negotiation that could occur with the teachers then.
That's one. You bet. That's one of the variables. As we go and as we finalize 12-13, we'll go back and look at expenditures. And again, we're doing that now, but we've got other adjustments. We've got the auditors coming in, and so once we get those numbers, we adjust, we'll adjust this more based on what the actual numbers are coming in at. We've got some projections that we use now, and then we'll continue to adjust the budget.
Obviously, salaries and benefits is our biggest item.
Yep.
It's roughly 70% of the budget. But these other items, I counted 4 items there that we have that are actually going up by more on a percentage basis. And just to understand, then the capital objects, that was safety and security.
Right.
That increase.
Yep.
And then other purchase services going up 11%. But would that include then the pre-referendum contract?
Right,
And does
when
it
you look at
include-
that, other purchase services, that's a pre-referendum contract, it's the estimate for the UU studies, and then it's also the ITS
Okay,
infrastructure.
it's all 3 of those
Yeah.
then, that's what I was
Yeah,
asking.
so actually, if you took those 3 items up above, so if you took the safety and security at 360, you took the 177 for the pre-referendum and the estimate on the UU studies, and then the 215 for the ITS infrastructure, that accounts for about 1.5% of the increase. So, just to put it into perspective.
Okay. And then the other 2 that I saw, the interfund transfer to special ed, and that's, again, a federal government issue, and that's why, because of the sequestration reduction?
That's part of, yeah, that's part of it. And then, of course, we have, special education has their own costs, and like all costs, a lot of them are inflationary driven, so costs go up by inflation as well.
And then open enrollment is another one that's going up more, but that's because of the approvals we made for people to leave the district and not approving as many coming into the district.
Right, yeah, and those, the open enrollment numbers, the ins, so the open enrollment in generates the revenue, open enrollment out as a cost to the district. Those numbers are pretty soft, because what we find going forward is those that have applied don't always go through with it. So those numbers will change too as we go through, and we know what people where they're finally coming in.
Thank
So,
you. I don't have any further questions.
Any other board member questions or comments? Tim, I think it's helpful to have the June and July side by side when we review it last as a board to see how those changes have happened. So I think that's a nice change. It's good to see that on there. Thanks.
Good.
Okay. Do you have something, Mary?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So now we're going to move on to the next page. And this is really to give you some perspective. Again, when we look at the budget over time, and we look at inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, and really where are we with the 13-14 budget. So the information goes across, and then we just, for sake of continuity, we use budgeted numbers. So general fund budget expenditures, you can see those from 07-08 through now, through the 13-14 budget. And then the Consumer Price Index is underneath there, and this Consumer Price Index is on a calendar year basis. Of course, we're on a fiscal. But if we took and applied the Consumer Price Index each year to the budget and just rolled it forward, so we have an inflation-adjusted budget when we get out to 12-13, you can see that even, of course, including the negative year 2009, where CPI was a negative 0.36, if we adjusted that for inflation over time, we'd be looking at the 12-13 budget being $54,671,000. The budget for 12-13 was $50,224,000, so $4.2 million less than what you would have had if you would have adjusted your budget by inflation each year, using 07-08 as a base year. You can see in 9-10, and then again in 11-12, we had some fairly significant drops in the budget due to state aid reductions. So the budget was adjusted and reduced, and cuts were made to accommodate that. But if you take that $54 million for the 12-13 adjusted by inflation, and you compare it to where we are now with the 13-14 of $53 million, we're really still $1.2 million under an annual adjusted budget for inflation. And then further, if you go through that and say, what's the average annual growth in our budgeted expenditures? And so measuring from 08, 09 through 13, 14, it's 1.32%. So that's 1.32% on average each year. And again, as I mentioned, the preliminary budget is $1.2 million below an inflation-adjusted budget if we were to adjust those numbers yearly. And again, the 13-14 budget does recover a portion of those budget reductions in 9, 10, and 11, 12. So that just gives you a little more information and perspective. So, any questions?
Questions for Tim, board members? Okay. We'll move on to the next. Do you have anything?
I do appreciate this, this graph, Tim, and I think it does give us a good perspective of over time, the fact that we really have, yes, 53 million is a big number, but when you compare it against, where we've been at since 07, 08, really hasn't been that much of an increase. So I think, again, this is a testament, at least in my view, that, we have been fairly fiscally responsible in handling the budget. And just our discussion earlier, since we've looked at the June preliminary budget, and I know we've talked about it at the Finance Committee, we continue to carve out some additional expenditures, and we've gotten the levy down to 2.10%, where I think when we first started looking at it, we were over 3, weren't we?
Yeah, we were probably somewhere in a 3.5, a little over 3.5 range, and now we're down to 1.62. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the kind of stuff I really appreciate you guys going back and, revisiting it and looking for, yes, some of it's out of our control, but I think there are things that you guys go back and take a look at and see where we might be able to achieve some more savings. So,
well, it's a collective effort. So.
Thanks.
Any other board member comments for Tim or questions? Okay, we'll move on to number 3C, County UU Wetlands Delineation Study. Tim.
Okay, me again. Okay, I've got, I pulled select information from our wetlands delineation report that we received back from our wetlands expert, and it's the the summary, and this again was one of the things that going forward that was determined that we should be doing on this land is to really find out in a hopefully a final way of what potential wetlands exist out there. So again, we did go forward, and we did contract with a DNR professionally assured delineation specialist, and that's Wetlands and Waterways LLC. And the specialist did or wetlands investigation of the site, of the UU site. And again, if I'm going to the introduction, just picking out a few pieces of that introduction, the intent of the delineation under the first paragraph was to identify wetlands on the property as well as acceptable upland building areas for a proposed future school site. And again, it was conducted by Ann Mikulski, and she is a professionally assured delineator. And what that means is normally the DNR will accept this report as being final. There is language in there, however, there changes can happen to wetlands over time, and so that part of it isn't guaranteed. What she's saying, and the third, and I'm going to focus in on the third paragraph. No wetlands were identified during the site visit, so that's good news. The site consists primarily of large upland ridges with steep slopes leading to lower lying areas along the west side of the site. A small low-lying area along the northwest portion of the site was mapped as having hydric soils, but the site visit indicated these soils do not meet hydric soil criteria, and therefore that area is not a wetland. There is also a swale located in the southwest portion of the property that was not mapped as having hydric soils, but was also examined for the presence of wetlands, but was also determined to be upland. So that's good news for this piece of property. The precipitation levels were much higher than normal for the period that she went out and investigated the site. And again, I'll turn to page 6, which are the conclusions. And no wetlands were identified during the site visit. And I'm going to jump down to the third paragraph. The findings of the wetland delineation report are only valid for the site conditions which existed at the time of this investigation. So there are some caveats to this report. All wetland boundaries and jurisdictional determinations presented in this report are preliminary and subject to verification by the USACE St. Paul District, so U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I think we've got a pretty good determination here that, as far as we know, we don't have wetlands at that site. And the last page is the map. It's a Wisconsin wetland inventory map. And you can see where some of the areas of concern, if you look at our property, which is outlined with the black border, and you look at the more of the north central area on that map, and you can see that pink area that juts in. It actually goes across UU, and it juts into the property, and that was an area of concern for wetlands. But as the wetland expert determined, this was not a wetland. So, any questions?
Board members, questions for Tim? Sandy?
I have a couple questions. First of all, does that mean, since there's no wetlands there, does that mean we can grade it? Wouldn't that be nice? We can level it. Well, I'm just asking. I don't know. I know you can't grade beyond 12% slopes can't be disturbed and things like that.
Yeah.
But basically, with no wetlands there, there's no areas that we can't fill in then. We can only not fill in designated wetlands, and there's none there, right?
Well, yeah, according to this report, and then I would say subject to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that it may have to go through a review there. But in general, you can fill in. But if you do have drainage, you have to deal with that somehow as well.
You have to provide for proper drainage. I understand that. But this is good then, that
Yes.
that we don't need to deal with any areas that cannot be disturbed. But this is the first report, the first full report the district has ever had done to determine if there's wetlands out there, right? Dated June, whatever the date of this is, June 7th or whatever the date is.
Well,
Is this the first time?
we actually, what we did before is we had another report done, which was more of a wetlands mapping by Graham Environmental Services. So they went out to the site and they did some of the same thing, but not in as much detail. And this is much more detailed. So what they had come up with was potential wetlands.
Oh, okay. So before, when the statement would be made that we couldn't use UU because there were wetlands there, you were basing those comments, the district was basing those comments on information out of Graham's report. There had never been a full report done like this, correct?
Right. And we always said
Okay.
those were potential wetlands.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Board members, any other questions for Tim? Sandy?
I want to know when we can hire the backhoe and start grading.
Tim, I have a question for you. When we had the intergovernmental meeting, the county representatives expressed concerns about environmental corridors. So will this report satisfy their concerns about that and override their concerns, or do we not know that?
The answer to that is no, because that's a different thing. And Sandy kind of alluded to a 12% grade. The 12% grade that the county is referring to is within the Hudson area sewer service plan. And there are environmental corridors that the city and county would determine couldn't be disturbed. This is just dealing with the wetlands issue. So it doesn't, the other part of the slope, the disturbing slope, is a totally separate issue that we have to work through. So this is just one step.
Sandy?
And there may be other environmental issues to deal with, though, that Ellen Denzer was talking about those at the meeting. So because of the 12% slopes and where they are, there may be other environmental issues that we need to deal with. This just resolves the wetland issue.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions, comments for Tim? Okay. We'll move on then. Item number 4, citizens' request to speak. Do we have anything, Diane? No. Okay. Then the next item on our agenda is 6A under our topics for action. And that will be me. Board members, in your packet, you have the materials we reviewed in detail when the Board of Education met June 25th in a 2-hour work session in which all of the members of the Board of Education were present. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss and review the remaining options for secondary space. The session was held in conjunction with our consultant from Hoffman, Catherine Quickshank, who analyzed the options and prepared the observations and questions that needed to be considered to evaluate all of the options. We also reviewed, as part of that process, the estimated enrollments, talked about maintaining the house concept, and supporting high school learning for the future, i.e. the program delivery. As a result of that meeting, there was interest by board members in eliminating 2 options. So unless there's another direction that the board wants to take tonight, I don't think we want to go through all of the options and presenting all of that detail that we reviewed, but rather I would suggest that we discuss the options that we suggested eliminating that evening. We have consensus that that would make sense. Okay. So by way of review, we discussed eliminating option 1, which was to construct a 4-year high school, convert the current high school to a 7-8 building, and the current middle school converted to a 5-6 building. We discussed elimination of that option. Among the reasons for that was, while this option would fix the enrollment problem that we have at the high school, it creates excess capacity at that building as it's converted from a low of 638 excess capacity to a high of 791 at the current high school, which would be the converted 7-8 building, and excess capacity from a low of 114 to a high of 260 at the current middle school. It also creates excess capacity in the elementary schools. So I don't know, board members, do we want to go into further detail to discuss that? Does somebody want to make a motion to eliminate that option? Need to hear from you on kind of how you want to proceed in this. Bruce?
Make a motion to eliminate option 1.
It's been a motion made by Bruce. Second made by Jamie. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any further discussion? Jamie?
I seconded the motion, and I think you did allude to what was discussed, because we went into a lot of detail in that 2-hour session. I think most of the time was spent discussing, well, it's kind of split between the 4-year, the STEM, and then the 3-year option. With this 4-year option, I think it's pretty clear that it's going to create more capacity than probably what we need. I don't know that we can afford to build a 4-year high school and then try to fill it. We certainly don't need to create more space. There's no projections that say the elementary schools are going to fill in the next 10 years. Now, that still could happen. You know, projections have been too low before for our district, just like when we built our current middle school. It was supposed to be good for 20 plus years, and we filled it in less than 10 or around 12, whatever. So I think that there's a multitude of reasons, but expense being the primary one, that for a 4-year school at this time to not be an option. Now, I want to stress, whatever option we end up going with, that we have flexibility so that future school boards might have the option of converting whatever's built to go back to a 4-year high school. But I think that building a new 4-year high school and then having the school district retain ownership of the current 4-year high school, even if we do fill partially with moving the administration, I still think it creates too much space. It's a different problem than what we have right now, but that's why I support it.
Any other board member comments? Mary?
Just add some information for our audience who happens to be listening, and something that we did talk about at the work session. You know, we're comparing whatever the use of the current high school to an enrollment capacity of 1,680 students. And I just want to reiterate that once again. That means how many seats we have in classrooms, but we do not have that much space in the common areas, the cafeteria, the media center, and so forth, to accommodate that many students. In addition to that, if we look at updating that building to whatever use it is, we would look at taking some of the current classroom space in the remodeling effort and using that in the updated version. So for example, the hall's a problem for us. We've got to get more space somehow, and the space that we have is space in classrooms or space in the media center. So we would be taking it from other places, and therefore it would be reducing the capacity of that building. We don't know what the updated capacity would be. We don't have those numbers. So we're using 1680 in comparison, but we just need to recognize for each of these options that the 1680 would be a lower number as we move forward in remodeling the high school to whatever a new use would be.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Sandy, did you have something?
Well, I just have one comment. If you took one complete grade out of the high school, which is what the talk is now with option 2, would then you not have enough space in the hallways if you're removing 400 and some students from that building? Would that not resolve the common area spaces?
That would have to be assessed. And so let's take another area, the art rooms. No matter what we would use, we would need to restructure those art rooms for 21st century curriculum, and that would take space from other places.
Well, I guess I'm sorry, Madam
Jamie?
Chair. Yes. All the more reason why we probably should be working to narrow these options, because we can spin our wheels in having Huffman look at a lot of different options and trying to come up with a cost estimate. But unless we know what the current high school is going to be used for, we're not going to be able to determine what that capacity is. If it's going to be a 3-year high school, if it's going to be a half of a 4-year middle school, if you will, or if it's going to be a 2-year junior high, or if it's, you know, there's lots of different ways that we can go with that building. But it clearly, having been in that building lots over the last 10 years that I've had kids there, and then since in doing the tours, that we've got a lot of updating to do at that high school, and that's going to be done regardless of how it's going to be used, whether it's a high school, a junior high, or a middle school.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? We have a motion on the floor by Bruce, a second by Jamie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Okay, the next item, or the second option that we discussed eliminating, was option number 3, which was to construct a 6 through 12 school for 700 students. Highlighted in some of the areas of concerns of the board members at the meeting was that enrollment would exceed capacity at the Hudson Middle School in 2017-18 under that current system, and at the Hudson High School in 2020, and would require additions to both of those facilities. This option also did not allow for the sale of the Administrative Services Center, which was considered to be a priority. It will also require either duplication in programs or the elimination of offerings to all students. So, for instance, in the areas of music, art, global languages, and family and consumer sciences. Also, among the discussion points was that it creates inequity across the district. Board members, do you have any other comments to highlight some of the discussion that happened in that meeting? Bruce.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments. You know, in terms of the STEM skills themselves, one of the things that I think is important, and talk about the inequity, we'd really only be hitting about 25% of the students in the high school learning for the future plans that we already have in place. Really do address the STEM skills and bring those forward in many of the different curriculums that we are applying. So, you know, I think it's important for us to make sure that we're educating all of our kids and giving them the right opportunities and allowing them to excel in certain areas. So I do like the fact that we've built those in, and I think that we will continue to look at those and address the needs of STEM skills for our students in the 21st century learning.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other board member comments? Do we have a motion?
Well, I would move to eliminate option 3 as one of the options.
Motion by Jamie, second by Dan.
Roll call vote.
Any further discussion?
Well, as far as the reasons for making the motion, I think primary among them are the multitude of questions, and I'm looking at our materials from the work session, and
Maybe Diane, you could put that up on the board.
it's actually 4 pages of questions that Hoffman raised as far as policy decisions that we would need to make as a school district and the direction. I think enrollment and projections for accommodating space it's an important option, it's an important consideration, and I think that I don't think it's very cost effective to build something that's going to solve our space issue for maybe 5 or 6 years or 7 years. We need to do something that's further out than that. But even secondary to that was the policy decisions that need to be made as far as this direction with the STEM school. I also look at cost effectiveness for having a second high school in a sense. And I think, I wasn't on the board then, when there was surveys in the community back in the 90s, I think, late 90s. Maybe, Dan, you were on the board then, but the community was surveyed as to, what do they want to do, what direction do they want to go, do they want to go to a second high school, and there's a rather strong response from the community that they wanted to stay a single high school community. And by having a STEM school, you are creating a second high school. A lot of these questions, there may be answers to them, but I don't know if now is the time to be looking at this when we're looking at a secondary space option that I think should solve our issue for quite a while rather than just for the short term. Looking at the concept, I love the concept of the STEM school, and I'm very excited about our high school learning for future and our academy program, but I think the cost factor to this is having basically dual programs. We're still going to have, if we would still have a high school learning for a future, you're duplicating faculty that would be at 2 different schools. I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but the other one that I think other board members can comment on as well is this decision about who gets in. I know that it could be a very popular item, one that we might need to have a lottery or a merit basis to get in, but we're faced with a space issue in which we need to be able to accommodate space for both a middle school and a high school, which means you have to start the STEM school process at 6th grade is what is being proposed. What if we don't have 100 students that want to volunteer to do this? In order to accommodate that space, we're either going to have to add on to the middle school or add on to the high school to accommodate those people that want to stay in the regular high school. I put air quotes around that comment. And then those that if you don't have the 100 that want to move to the STEM, and or I don't think anybody wants to be in a situation where you're going to force people to say, well, we didn't get our 100, but because we don't have enough room at the regular school, we're going to have to send you to the STEM school to go there. These are issues that I think it's a little premature with our high school learning for the future. I want to see how that goes, and I'm excited about the project Lead the Way, science, technology, and engineering and math that we're already planning for. And to scuttle that and go off in another direction to solve our space issue may be a little premature.
Any other board member questions or comments?
Roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote, starting with you, Jamie.
I vote aye on the motion.
Robson, aye.
Hanson, aye.
Gerke, no.
The motion passes. Okay, next item on our topics for action is 6B, County Road UU Soil Boring Study and Testing for On-Site Utilities. Tim.
Okay, next step in reviewing the UU site. And again, this would be having the ability to move forward to study the site, study the UU site more in depth, and it would include things such as soil borings, doing sampling borings across the site, probably anywhere from 10 to 12 different borings to look at soils and to determine what can be supported for a building, determine if there are areas that you wouldn't want to put a building as opposed to areas that you can put a building. It would also include looking at the ability to draw well water off of the site. In addition, it would go into some more in-depth iterations of looking at a on-site septic system. So having our own on-site utilities and what can the site accommodate as far as how many students can we accommodate on a school out there. So it's a next step in really determining what exactly the UU site can accommodate in terms of size of a school, location. Again, they're samplings. Nothing is exact here, but these are samplings, and these are things that need to be determined to move forward in looking at the UU site. Any questions?
Board members, any questions, comments for Tim? Sandy?
Is there a cost? Do you have an estimate of cost?
Oh, I wish there was. I can tell you that it is probably going to be somewhere between 25 and 50,000.
Okay.
But we've been talking initially to some consultants. We've got some information from prior, and that would be a range I would give at this point, very very roughly.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Bruce?
Madam Chair, is there any information anywhere through maybe research that you've done or questions that you've asked that you can share with us that maybe borings have been done in the past on this site?
That's a good question. It's something that we've checked into in the past. We've asked again, and we've talked to a number of different engineering firms, ones that have done work for the district in the past, like American Engineering and Testing, Stevens Engineers. We talked to Zappa Brothers. We talked to SDS Architects just to find out, is there anything else that we're missing in our information that might be out there? And the answer was no every time that we talked to those folks.
So we also spoke with Arnie Fett and previous Superintendent Ron Bernth and John Schomer, who was a school board member at the time of purchase of the property.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Chernoy?
Tim, question regarding where they go about, that's a big space. How do they go about approaching where to do those borings?
Well, that's another good question. We'd look at prime areas where the building could be located, and those would be some areas, and then just as a matter of efficiency and cost savings, so we don't have to have a machine come out again, an ATV
Right.
driller come out again. We test drill in other sites across the property, but that's to be determined yet.
Okay.
Is exactly
Yeah.
where that would be.
It would almost seems like we could help narrow the scope a little bit, especially if there are some areas that just aren't feasible for.
Yeah, there would be, there certainly are areas where we're going to be needing to look at that 12% slope or greater. We're going to need to look at structure. Some places on the site are up to 130 feet of elevation change. So there are sites that you'd want to avoid. But again, we want to try to get a good sampling of the property because it may be that we've got good soils in one location, and then next to that there are soils that aren't good. So we're gonna do a sampling across that property.
Mm-hmm. I just thought of this question: if we were to ever try to sell that property, would it make sense to make sure that we've done a good broad sampling so that if we were to, sell it to a developer or someone like that, then we would have
Yeah.
covered those bases and it might make it a little more marketable in that sense? Is that-
I think, yeah, any of that information certainly is going to be valuable to a developer. And these borings are usually something, it's not, they don't change as much as, say, wetlands can change over time. The soil borings are usually, there may be changes in the level of the water table, for instance, but that's really about it. So the soil borings are good for indefinitely. So they'd definitely be a asset to, if that were the next step to someone looking at purchasing.
Madam Chair, I had one question. To do this in a cost-effective manner, I think I was going to ask the question Bruce already asked. Hasn't this been done before, since the district's owned the property for more than 12 years? But I imagine it may not have been done because the referendum was defeated, and then we had the economy hit. Nobody attempted to seriously look at building there since. Yeah,
to give you an answer from one of the folks that I spoke to, that's done a fair amount of work for the district in the past as far as soil samples. He said it wasn't. Usually the district didn't move ahead with borings unless they were ready to build, and so that's in his opinion. He said and he's done a lot of soil samplings for the district in the past, and so again we combed through a long list and followed back with different engineering firms, and as Mary mentioned, previous board members and administration, just to see if they had any recollection of anything that we might be missing.
And a question on piggyback Dan's cost effectiveness question about trying to get an idea, zero in and focus on certain areas. Is that part of the pre-referendum services that Huffman might, advice they could give as far as potential landing areas for a school?
No, that would be separate, because this is really, Hoffman's working on the really the programming phases and getting cost estimates. This is a site issue specific to the UU site, so this would not be included in their services.
So who's the engineer that would give us the expert advice as to where to do these borings, or we just trust the person who's doing them?
Well, yeah, we're going to have to have a trust level with any professional that we work with, and so we'll be relying on whatever engineering firm is chosen in the end and talking. But again, I think the point's well taken that if we look at the site and 10 to 12 borings don't appear to be enough, we'd do more just to make sure that we've covered as much of that property as we can. But again, it's something where we'll need to go back and look at the map and look at where they think we should be drilling those test borings. I mean, I can tell you from an example, when we did the middle school edition a few years back, we had test borings done there, and unfortunately, in the end, there was a vein of bad material, and that vein was not picked up in all the different borings that were done, and it was fairly costly. I mean, we still brought the project in under budget, but it was a cost that we hadn't expected, and those are types of things that can happen. So it's not an exact thing. We're just sampling.
And again, I think maybe it was stated, but for the public that's watching these meetings, they need to know the reason why we're doing this is determine what size building could go on that property.
That's exactly it. We want to shore up. We have an engineering study that says the site won't accommodate a large secondary building, and then we have the oral statement from the engineer saying, well, he says he'd be comfortable saying 650 to about 700 students, but to do any more than that, we've got to do more testing, and that's what this is going to do, is to help determine what size, how many students could be accommodated in a building on that site.
Any other board member questions or comments? Tim, I just have a quick one for you, a couple quick ones actually. I think, historically we had, or I remember seeing an aerial that identified areas that could support a footprint for a school. Is that something that we would be able to provide to these, who's ever going to do these borings, to show them areas that have sort of been identified as flatter areas or areas where a footprint could go of for
Yeah,
a school?
I think those would be areas that we would concentrate on, again, and then, but again, in some regards, you want to cover that whole property because you're not, you may be looking at athletic fields. We want to look to the future so that you've got enough information going forward that if you decide to add an athletic field in the future, you know that you've got potentially have good soils in any of those locations or areas that you have to stay away from.
And have we talked about how many bids we're going to obtain to do this work?
We'll probably be looking at 3 different proposals, and we'll do a qualified base selection process.
And they'll have their scope of work included in that as well as...
Pardon, I'm sorry, I didn't
They'll
hear.
have their scope of work included in that proposal?
Yes, yeah, and we'll be reviewing that to make sure it's what we need as well.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Tim, do you want to just clarify the difference between work that's bid out and proposals?
Sure, yeah. When we go for professional services, such as this, using an engineering firm, architecture firms, et cetera, we're not really doing a bid. I mean, we're certainly looking at the cost. We're looking at the proposed cost from firms. But we want to look at, these are professional services, so they're not homogenized like buying a textbook. And we know if we're looking at the same textbook, we can go based on price. It's a little bit different with professional services. We want to make sure that we're choosing a firm that does this on a regular basis, that has experience with Wisconsin, DNR, U.S. Army Corps, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be looking at a lot of different qualifications.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, board members?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I think we need to go forward with this. I would speak in favor of this. We really need to know what we can do with that property, and if it turns out that we can't get a building there with well and septic, and we can't get city water and sewer out there, then we have a decision to make about whether or not to sell it. But in order to come to that point, we need to know what we can do with it. And this is just as money that we have to spend to figure out what we can do with the property. So I am very much in favor of spending this money to get these engineering studies done so we know what we have.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Board members, do you have another comment, Dan?
I was just going to make a motion.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the administration to contract for further testing and study for on-site utilities on the district's county UU property, giving the board president and vice president authority to approve said contracts for this work.
Motion made by Dan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bruce. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, item 6C, and it goes along with item 6D, so my intro is going to cover both. They both came to the committee as transition planning items. So, board members, by way of introduction, before you in items 6C and 6D under the topics for action are transitional support plans. As you know, we have 2 new district administrators on board as of July 1st, and it has been a district practice to create transition support plans to help our new administration identify and prioritize what is important in their initial focus, to provide training, and to support a successful transition. In analyzing the resources that we have available to aid in these transitions, the superintendent has identified 2 areas that we have a need for a specific period of time and the expertise available to deliver those services. In the proposed plan, we would utilize Nancy Sweet's expertise and knowledge in the district in 2 targeted areas. First for your consideration is item 6C, a transitional leadership support plan for pre-expulsion and the expulsion process. The plan consists of the following. Nancy would facilitate the pre-expulsion work for the 2013-2014 school year. The range of the number of pre-expulsions that we have are anywhere from 27 on the low end to 47 on the high end over the last 4 years. And on the expulsion process, it's been on the low end 2 and on the high end 7. The estimated time that she would spend providing these services for the pre-expulsion process would be a half day at a cost of $200, with a range based on the history of the number of pre-expulsions that we've had, around $5,400 on the low end to $9,400 on the high end. The estimated time for the expulsion work is a day and a half, with an estimated cost based on the history of the expulsions that we've had of $1,200 to $4,200. So the total cost of the estimated plan is between $6,600 on the low end to $13,000 on the high end. The expulsion work would transition to Tony Meyer and Andrea Volker as Tony's backup, and Nancy will train them in the spring. Tony will take over as his time permits by June 30th. The committee has reviewed this plan and has consensus to support this item and has asked for it to be moved forward to the board for action as a leadership transition support plan for Nancy Sweet to handle the pre-expulsion process for the 2013-14 school year, and training the Director of Student Services to take over in his official capacity starting July 1st, 2014. Mary, do you have any further information to add? Okay. Board members, do you have any questions or comments of either Mary or myself?
Madam Chair,
Dan.
just a question that, what do we do in the event that we don't have any, let's say we really have a very few frequency of pre-expulsions. I'm assuming the reason for this is that we want to provide the training and experience to these new individuals, but if we're not getting the cases, does that mean that potentially we're going to be extending this arrangement beyond that, or would there be training going on without necessarily having an expulsion to?
Mary, do you want to address the time sensitive of that,
I guess I'm just
sensitivity of
Certainly.
that nature, and what the plan would, how it would evolve in that event?
That would be a great opportunity to have a reduction of pre-expulsions and the discipline situations that surround them. So we'd love that to happen. That hasn't been our experience, and I think Diane has, over the last 3 years, the number of pre-expulsion conferences ranging from 35 to 47, as Lynn talked about, and then the expulsion hearings from 2 to 7. So, Dan, I have been trained in this process as well, and that training can occur outside the process. Certainly it's best when you can watch it in action and be coached to start moving it forward. But we would, if we find in the spring that we don't have the number of conferences or hearings, certainly the training would be ongoing. And Tony would take it over July 1 with Andrea's support as backup.
Okay, and so the arrangement would be only when there's events or either pre-expulsion conferences or expulsion hearings that we would be employing the services of Nancy, or would we be using her services irregardless if there's?
We would be using them for the conferences or the hearings.
Okay.
And then if, as you suggested, there may be a reduction of those this next year, then we would be using her services for training
Okay.
only, and it would be more limited.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Sandy?
maybe I missed this in the committee, but I don't recall there being a discussion about using her services for training if there wasn't enough, if there were not enough hearings and conferences to utilize her services. I don't recall there being any discussion about using her to train them. It was my understanding that she would only be used if it was necessary to handle these things that are on the sheet, hearings and conferences. So if I missed it, can someone let me know?
Mary?
Well, we didn't talk about it specifically, but we did talk about that she would transition to Tony with backup from Andrea, and that she would, as through that process, that she would be training them as she was holding those conferences. Dan brought up a different situation, that if we didn't have them, what do we need to do? And what we've done always with overlap from one administrator to a new administrator, there's always been that kind of overlap, and it would be more like the overlap. So it would be much more limited.
So her services will be used whether we have conferences or hearings or whether we don't. She'll still be providing services to the district.
Yes, but very limited.
Okay.
So, for example, we often have an administrator come back for a day to help provide information for the new administrator that they need to learn. So something like that might happen. It might be half a day or whatever.
Madam Chair?
Jamie?
All right. I acted as a substitute at the first committee meeting when this was then tabled, and I do recall that whole issue being brought up of why we needed the continuity. And now, as a member of the Learning and Program Development Committee, I'm going to be given a report later, and so it gives a little more historical perspective. But to follow up Dan's question about what if there's a reduction, obviously that would be a great problem to have if we had none. But just looking at the last 3 years, we've had at least 35. We've had 35 to 47 conferences. So I would bet that the likelihood that we're going to have 0 pre-expulsion conferences is pretty low. And likewise on expulsion hearings, we've had at least 2, I think, pretty much every year. So they're going to get a chance to see an expulsion hearing, and we won't have to have Nancy come back and pay her $200 to do a mock expulsion hearing or whatever. I think that we'll have the work there. And again, it's dependent on how busy it'll be, but that would be, I think, a win-win if we had even if it was cut in half, we're still going to have our new administrators trained, and we're going to be paying less for this service. So I would speak in favor of it.
Thank you, Jamie.
Madam Chair?
Sandy?
In looking at the figures on the screen, I would point out that how few expulsion hearings result from the pre-expulsion conferences, which is a real kudo to this district, and I have shared that, my praise for this system with Corey before he left, and the people that handle it. I think they've done a fabulous job. To have that many pre-expulsion conferences and ending up in only 2 expulsions is fabulous work on the part of the district. So having said that, I will tell you that I just have a conceptual problem with government employees retiring and then being rehired. But I understand the importance of this, and at the committee level, I also made this statement, that I understand with the state mandated timeframes that are involved with pre-expulsion conferences and expulsion hearings, and you have to stay within those timeframes. That I would go along with this on a limited basis to have Nancy come back as we need her to help the new people get acclimated to this system. It's important to stay within those state mandated timelines, and we may need her to do that. So I would not object to this.
Thank you, Sandy. Mary, did you have a comment?
I was just going to reiterate and reassure you, our history has been in the spring, that we usually have an increased number of pre-expulsion conferences. So fairly confident from our past history that there will be plenty of training opportunities.
Thank you. Any other board member comments or questions?
I would move to approve the recommendation of the committee.
Motion by Jamie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Bruce. Any other further board discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. Okay, board members. Next for your consideration is item 6D, Transitional Learning Support Plan for Board Policy. As way of background, there are 7 sections and 260 individual policies in the current policy manual. In the last 5 years, 49 or almost 20% of the 260 policies have been revised or developed new. The goals that we have associated with the policy update include assuring that the district has all policies required by statute, assuring that the policies that are in place are both compliant with statute and consistent with practice, which I personally believe that only someone with district experience would be effective at doing that component of it. Move forward with board consideration policies recommended to be in place by WASB, By way of example, that would be staff development. Evaluate existing policies and recommend for deletion those that are obsolete, in statute, not required to be in policy, or more procedural than policy. So for example, that would be student eligibility for driver's education and bomb threat procedures. Review and revise, if necessary, those policies most frequently used by the administration. So for example, that would be parent input for child's class and teacher assignment and political activity. Renumber and reorder those policies out of sequence or in less appropriate sections, and correct any non-substantive or clerical errors and provide non-substantive language updates. For example, we use in policy Director of Fiscal Operations, and Mr. Erickson's title is Financial Services Director, and also refers in one of the sections as latchkey instead of school-age care. So the board policy update transitional proposal would be for WASB to provide statutory review and renumbering where applicable at a cost of $1,000. The estimated time frame is 4 to 6 weeks after board approval. To hire Nancy Sweet to update the remainder of the policies at $400 a day for up to 30 days, an estimated cost of $12,000, with targeted completion by June 30th, 2014. Dependent on board calendar and schedule. And if the policy work takes longer, the board would need to authorize additional time or transition the rest of the work to Andrea Volker. To provide for transition and ownership, Andrea will be presenting the revised, new, or deleted policy material to the board and the committees. And the estimated cost total for the total policy package would be $13,000. And based on input from board member Mr. Hanson, we've added a check-in period and a review to determine progress after the first 15 hours. So the committee as a whole supported to move forward to the board for action a contract with WASB to handle a quick check of policies for statute compliance and renumbering, and a leadership transition support plan for Nancy Sweet to work on updating board policies. Up to 15 days for policy work would be authorized within the first 6 months of the 2013-2014 school year, with a progress report to the Personnel Committee within that time frame. The Personnel Committee would be authorized to grant up to another 15 additional days of policy work if necessary. Mary, do you have anything to add?
Well, just as Nancy had this as a goal to work on updating our policy manual with these goals over this last year. And the scope of work in HR certainly is very extensive. And as a result, she started the work, but she wasn't able to finish it. And so we're hoping that we're able to give Andrea some relief so that she can focus on the primary priorities of her office for this first year, and then taking it over once the policies are updated. Again, she would be presenting those policies to you, and you would see them as they are coming to committee, and then maybe in the consent agenda for revisions, or if there's something new, it would be coming to committee and then to the board for action. So you would be seeing the work as it progresses.
Thank you, Mary. Board member questions or comments? Sandy? Bruce?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments. I thought we had a good discussion on this. While many of the policies, if you look at the deletions and edits that need to be made, many of them haven't been updated or looked at since 1990. So I think that there is considerable risk on our side by not having those updated. Granted, we haven't had a lot of issues that have come up, but to put some timestamp on this to make sure that we stay focused on doing some checks and balances on the work that we're getting done and the accomplishments that are being made. I look at it as a deal. We also had, as part of our discussion during that meeting, to have WSB look at updating the policies as well, and the amount of cost that would have been incurred by the district for WSB to conduct those changes would have been a much higher rate, would have been much higher cost to our district as well. So I see this as getting good educated support to get our policies up to date and move forward with for our board.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other board member comments, Sandy?
Well, I have an objection to this. I just believe that paying retired employees not to work and then paying them to work is, in my opinion, called double dipping. I have a real problem with it. There are no state statute guidelines or timeframes that we need to meet for the updating of these policies, as there was with the expulsion issue. So I see them as two different things. I'm not going to be able to support this. I didn't support it at the committee level, and I won't be able to support it this evening either. I really believe that the two people that we've hired are probably extremely capable and are going to be able to handle this level of work without much trouble.
Thank you, Sandy. Any other board member question, comments?
Madam Chair?
Jamie?
All right. I had it right the first time. All right. In looking at these policies, I know from a legal standpoint that to hire an employment lawyer to go through and revise employment policy manuals is extremely expensive, time-consuming. And Bruce alluded to the fact that have WASB do this, which they would put their staff attorneys on this job. But what they don't have is the history of the district and the understanding of why these policies, virtually every policy. Now, I haven't read all the policies myself yet. In fact, very small fraction thereof. If we could get rid of some policies, I think that would be a good thing. And that's part of this whole process of policy review, which I think is very important to do from time to time. But to have somebody to do it, that virtually every policy, I would bet, was probably enacted during Nancy's tenure here at the school. And so maybe not while she served in her last position. She has 30 years of experience. And I think that's invaluable. At $400 a day, that's at $50 an hour, you're not going to pay any attorney. No attorney would do that work. Plus, it might take that attorney twice as long because they don't understand the background and haven't worked with these policies for dozens of years like Nancy has. I'm a big believer in experience is worth paying for. And I also think it's very important when we're having transition with 5 new administrators to try and focus on continuing to move our district forward. And as was shown by the attempt to update these policies, in the last year, I don't know how long this process has been going on, but to have somebody that can be able to focus on just this, I think is very valuable and allows our administrators to get up to speed on their current jobs. If we can, again, get this process done, because I know Sandy makes a very good point about there's no timeline to do this, but that's the very reason what a lot of boards and administrators do in private business to push it off to the next year and the next year and next year. And pretty soon we're going to be in 2020 with policies that are 4 decades old. And so I think that to do it now, and not that I don't trust our current board, our current administration or anything like that, but to be able to have policies that are in place, it makes it fair, because you never know who's going to be in place in these jobs down the road, and be able to have consistency and have the historical perspective is very important.
Thank you, Jamie. Dan?
Madam Chair, just a couple comments and maybe a question. And Nancy, if you're watching, we really do appreciate your willingness to come back and help with these projects. I would have guessed she might have wanted to just be done, but that's great. Regarding this approach to reviewing the policies, I guess my question is, did you say that WASB would be doing an initial review on the which ones need to be in legal compliance? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So as a result of that, and with Nancy's involvement, does that mean that that takes having to use our outside counsel out of the equation? I didn't hear that come up, because it seems to me on several occasions we've used Mick to sort of take a look at some of the policies that we've, made revisions to, or so is that not going to be needed, or is that a potential expense that we should be planning for as part of this process?
Dan, without knowing the specific policies that we're looking at, I couldn't specifically tell you, but what WASB is doing is really looking at the numbering that we have on our policies, because some of them do need to be placed in a different area. And then they're also looking for the legal compliance, and what they will do is tell us this is out of compliance, but they won't write the policy for us. And so it's really a quick review that they do. Nancy will then take the information that they give us and move that forward. I would say that would minimize any additional expense from our attorney, but there may be some, when it relates specifically to Hudson practices, that may be different than we don't have examples from, say, WSB. We have example policies or something from them. But I don't see it as the major expense. The major expense is going to be the work on the policies to update the manual.
Okay. So I guess I appreciate all the comments made, including, comments by Jamie, but I could certainly see, based on my history with policy, revisions and updates, that, if we're going to have WASB take the initial review, and there's going to be an expense with that, and Nancy's involvement, and then potentially, having legal review, and also doing this within a compressed period of time, my sense would be your estimate is probably a little bit conservative.
Madam Chair? Estimate of time, is that what you're talking about, Dan, or the total dollars, or? Could be, but I think that Board Member Hanson put some qualifications in, so there's some monitoring that the person, learning and program development.
No, personnel.
It is personnel? Okay, on this one, personnel would do. Sorry for my confusion. So there is a portion of monitoring that would occur, and again, the board members would be seeing the policies as they are brought forward to either committee or to the board for action.
Any other board members, questions or comments? This is a topic for action. Somebody be making a motion.
Make a motion to move on item 640.
Okay. Motion by Bruce. Is there a
Second.
Second by Jamie. Is there any further discussion?
Roll call vote, please.
Any other further discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. We'll start with Sandy.
Gerke, no.
Hanson, aye.
Robson, aye.
Johnson, aye.
The motion passes. He voted no. Okay, we're moving on to item 6E, 2013-14, school lunch pricing. Dan.
All right, let's talk about lunch. As we all know, the Hudson School District is part of the national initiative with the Federal Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, Paid Lunch Equity Rule. So once again, we're required to review our meal prices, and with the intentions of raising them by 5 cents to be in compliance with the federal laws. For 2013-14 federal reimbursement rate is currently $2.59. This is approximately a 3.5% average increase from last year. So as you can see, the prices that are being proposed for the increase for the next school year of 5 cents, it looks like we're going to have to do that in order to be compliant. The other thing noteworthy is that we continue to be, even with this increase, our average meal prices are still below the 2012-13 average range within our CISA schools of $2.16. So, any comments, anything to add, Tim?
Any comments, Tim?
No, I think, I'll just reiterate a little bit of what Dan said. Because of the rule, the federal rule that's in effect, what it's saying is that our prices are somewhat subsidizing free and reduced reimbursement rates. So the federal government has said you need to raise your prices if they're below that threshold number of $2.59. We run a program that is self-supportive. It's based on user fees. There is no local levy involved in that program. We do have additional costs, as Dan mentioned. We also have a change in that program to the fruit and vegetable meal requirement, which is rather than an optional serving of fruit and vegetables, it's more of a mandatory serving of fruit and vegetables. And so those have resulted in some increases in food costs during 12-13. But again, when you compare our pricing with the regional averages, we're still substantially below on most of those prices, and so that's all I've got.
Madam Chair?
Jamie?
Yeah, I had a question. Okay, so we have this graph up there, and it says the 2012, 2013 price, and then the proposed price. Where's this $2.59? What is that? Is that an average, or is that?
That's the number that the USDA calculates, and they say what they're saying is, if you're under the $2.59 level, then you need to raise your prices so that you're not subsidizing a free and reduced program. So, and what they're saying is you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it in increments, and the minimum increment is 5 cents per year. So we're just going on that minimum incremental increase, which is the 5 cents per year. But that 259 is a calculation set that's done by the USDA.
All right. So we'll likely be raising it again next year, whatever the minimum increment is.
It's possible. I think this rule's been in place for about 2 years now, if I'm not mistaken. There's a potential that could change. There is pressure. We communicate as well. Peggy Eller, our child nutrition coordinator, communicates with federal folks and with state folks. And we say, we have a concern when we don't need to raise prices, why we're being forced into raising prices. So we do have dialogue back and forth. And it takes a number of people to have that dialogue to get rules changed. But there's always a possibility the rule could change.
We're not making money at this. Are we sustaining the program, or what's the?
Right. We're really sustaining the program. We did have some additional fund balance in that fund, but again, those funds are invested back, such as for a good example, the Willow River food service area remodeling. Those are dollars that are just those dollars to make that operation more efficient are coming out of the food service budget. So,
well, I know it is only a nickel, but we're at least keeping the price of milk at 35 cents, and which I point out is more than what I paid for a lunch when I was in school for a whole day, for a whole lunch. But anyway.
And our lunches are really good.
Yes.
Sandy,
yeah, I know. I've eaten there. So.
Sandy, you had a comment?
You said this is a self-sustaining program, so all money that's collected from those people that are eating lunches pays for the cost of. Does it pay for the cost of the food, the cost of the help, or is it just the cost of the food?
When you look at the program itself, there aren't any local tax dollars that go into this, local levy dollars that go into the program. About 75% of the revenues are all fee-based and user-based, and it covers all of the costs. It covers the cost of the food. It covers the cost of those employees that work in the program. So it covers all those costs.
Thank you.
Any other board member questions or comments for Tim or Dan? Okay, board members, this is the topic for action, item 6E.
I would move to approve.
Motion by Jamie. Second by Sandy. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item 6F. It's the consent items. We have a board member who could read the motion as well as the authorization for expenditures. Dan?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills, to approve the consent items, and move that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,856,074.59.
Motion by Dan. Second by Sandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we're on to committee reports. First up is Sandy or Bruce, who's carrying facilities and grounds today? Sandy. Any questions for Sandy for facilities and grounds? Okay, we'll move on to Finance Committee. Dan?
Madam Chair, the Finance Committee met on June 24th, and the items on our agenda were review state biennial budget developments, which Tim covered earlier this evening, the 2014 preliminary budget update, which Tim also covered, and the school lunch pricing that we just took action on. No
All right.
other items.
Okay, any questions for Dan? Okay, we'll move on to Learning and Program Development with Jamie.
At Learning and Program Development, we first discussed the issue of the seniors' last day of school in relation to the graduation date. And one of the things that we looked at was other districts, how they handle it. This year, graduation was on June 15th, with the last day of school being June 13th, I believe, or was it the 12th?
It was the 12th, wasn't it?
But anyway, we had finals week, and then there was one day at least before the graduation ceremony itself. Okay, June 12th was the last day. I thought it was a Wednesday, because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, usually a 3-day final. And we looked at different options. You know, of course, I related back on talking about lunch prices back when I was in school. But when I graduated, it was always the third Friday in May. And of course, since then, we've had change in the legislature. And so a lot of this is dictated by the fact that the school year starts after Labor Day. However, school boards do have and can have flexibility in setting when the seniors are completed their learning. And the question is, when is a good time for that? And the primary driver of this is the ability for seniors to get out, get summer jobs, or do their summer internships, whatever they're doing before they go off to college, technical school, or go out into the private sector. And with our graduation being virtually the latest that I'm aware of in the area on either side of the river, in either state, it puts our seniors at a disadvantage that they have to be taking finals, you know, a day or two before a graduation ceremony that's in the middle of June. And I know that it's gradually creeped later into the year. We had it the second Saturday before, now it's the third Saturday in June. I know Meredith could probably add to some more of the rationale, but in looking at the different options, one was to possibly have the last day of school be that Memorial Day weekend. Even putting graduation during Memorial Day weekend. Don't know how that would be received. I know a lot of people go up north to cabins and so forth. Another would be moving graduation up so that we're trying to avoid the different sports, spring sports that have state tournaments. In the last school board meeting, we heard all of our great achievements of our athletic teams and who's going to state and so forth. But the largest team by far is track. We send the most to state. And if that state meet is on a Saturday afternoon, it's impossible for them to compete and get back here for 7 o'clock graduation. So that really rules out that second Saturday in June. So you either move it up 2 weeks to the first Saturday in June, or keep it where it's at, and then just allow the seniors to leave about 2 weeks early. So we took no action and made no recommendation, but just discussed it and thought that the administration needs to maybe sound out some of the parents of incoming seniors to see how they would feel. Not that is definitive, because the board's going to ultimately make the decision, but it would be good to know from families, how it would impact them. So that was one item, and then the second part was the pre-expulsion, but I would open it up. Any questions about the senior last day of school and graduation date? Mary, did I cover it fully?
Just one clarification, by law, they have told us that we can't start school before September 1st. And
I'm sorry, I said Labor Day. You're right, it's September 1st.
And sometimes that changes, so it's September 1st. And that has changed our school calendar quite significantly, and obviously the end of school has adjusted as a result of that.
Board members, any other questions for Jamie?
All right, then on the pre-expulsion expulsion report, which is the last report that Corey gave in his position as Student Services Director, and we've already touched on the fact that this pre-expulsion expulsion process has, I think, vastly improved. The board members have the 3-page report. I'm not going to go through this line by line. They don't need to, but I mean, I've had the benefit of attending, I guess if you call it that, 3 expulsion hearings, but I've been very impressed with the pre-expulsion process and how if we had expulsion hearings of the school board for every expellable offense, we'd be spending a lot of time in expulsion hearings. And I think that the pre-expulsion conference process, you see the statistics there. This last year, in 2012, 2013, we actually had, it was 37 pre-expulsion conferences. It has 32, but there was a total of 37, and 32 of those from the middle school, 5 from the middle school, I misspoke, and 32 from the high school. You see the breakdown on sex, gender, race, disability. But the important point is that this fluctuates every year. You can see there's a 19-year history, but the pre-expulsion conference has done a transformation in that the lowest number we've had in any one year is 2, but now we're up to 47 we've had in one year, which was within the last 3 years. And the number of students expelled has ranged from 1 to 18. So to answer that previous question, we've always had at least one student, I guess, that has been expelled, but the fact that we expelled 7 is actually an uptick from the 2 in each of the previous 2 years. So this is an efficient way of dealing with expellable offenses. And while our student population has grown significantly, one of the conclusions is that the incident rate of expellable misconduct has remained relatively constant. The number of students who commit expellable offenses is still a very small percentage, less than 1% of our grades 6 through 12 population. And in the past year, with the pre-expulsion process, we've had a written voluntary agreement that is proposed and signed at the time of the meeting. And this is very valuable, especially when you go back to it at the expulsion hearing, and you can point out to the student and the parents very clearly, this is what you agreed to. These were the conditions of us not expelling you, and you violated those, and it makes the process, I think, more streamlined. The other conclusion is that with this follow-up letter, it's another proactive effort to avoid any additional infractions of school rules. It asks the students and parents to take the opportunity to review items. And, obviously alcohol plays a big role in some of these expellable offenses. And sometimes the parents may not be even aware of it. And so it's bringing a problem to their attention and allowing the student to address it, which I think is very valuable. So there's various benefits that are listed on here, but I think the primary benefit, again, is just allowing the kids back in school, giving them a second chance. There are those that don't necessarily take advantage of that, and they are expelled. But even the ones that are expelled are told that in 2 years, if you do all these things, and it's usually an exhaustive list, you could still be readmitted. Now, the reality is that for those that are juniors and seniors, being 2 years out of school, it's unlikely that they're going to come back at the age of 19 or 20 back into school. But I think that probably Sandy can even touch on this, because I know that she's been in on those expulsion hearings with me and is impressed by this process.
Oh, I am. It's an outstanding process. very fair to the kids, gives them every chance. Because the last thing we want to do as school board is just throw kids out, just throw them out. They don't stand a chance if they're thrown out of school. So it has to be pretty egregious for us to do that. I think the system that this district has is outstanding, to try to keep kids involved, try to help them before we have to go to that level of saying, we can't do any more for you. I did want to ask that report that you're reading from, did I miss it? Because you said that the board members have that report. I don't remember seeing it.
It came in today's email.
Oh, in an email today that I didn't get? Okay. I'll look for it then. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other
Madam
questions or
Chair?
comments?
I just, we've talked quite a bit about the pre-expulsion and expulsion process, and I'd like to recognize Nancy Sweet and retired Superintendent Ron Bernth, who created this process, and we've been very fortunate, and our students have certainly benefited for many, many years because of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to echo, that was a statement I wanted to make, is that you can set up a process like this, but if you don't have the people that can implement it, and Sandy alluded to the timeframes, to be able to conduct these investigations, and, you know, I obviously can't get into specifics, but having some of these that involve multiple students, and you have to conduct multiple interviews in a very short period of time, it's a kudos to the administrators that make this a success.
Is there any chance we can patent this system and take it on the road?
Maybe sell it.
Hey, it might be some income for the district.
That's right, residuals.
Any other questions or comments for Jamie? Okay, move on to the Personnel Committee. Personnel Committee met on Tuesday, June 25th. We had 2 items on our agenda. We had a staffing update from Nancy Sweet, her last staffing update of the 25 certified positions reported to the committee in May. Only 3 positions remained unfilled as of her report. We had a part-time social worker, part-time Chinese language teacher, and a part-time German language teacher position. She indicated that these positions are difficult to fill, and the district has lost people, mainly because other districts are able to offer full-time and we have partial positions. And then also since the May meeting, we have 15 additional certified positions that have been posted. At her report, 9 of the 15 had been filled, and the positions were due primarily to resignation, retirement, and transfer to other certified positions within the district. And 3 of the new positions were previously approved by the board as part of that staffing plan. And one of the new positions is due to enrollment and adding another section at one of our elementaries. And that concludes my report, since we covered the other in our topics for action. Any questions for me? Okay. Seeing none, we are on to the last topic in our agenda, and that's to adjourn to closed session. If a board member could please read the language.
Madam Chair,
Sandy.
I move that we adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85, Parent 1, Parent D, to consider strategy for crime detection and prevention in relation to district-wide safety and security measures, and Parent C and Parent F to consider performance data of a specific employee and to consider specific personnel problems.
Motion made by Sandy.
A second.
Second made by Jamie. All those in favor, do we need a roll call? We need a roll call vote. We'll start with Jamie.
Aye.
Robson, aye.
Hanson, aye.
Gerke, aye.
Thank you.